Now, redesigns don't happen every year, but when they do, you really take notice. Now, hey, and welcome to this edition of Road Warrior. I'm your host, Grant Roberson, and behind me is the redesigned 2015 Chrysler 200S. Now, just from the outside, we can easily tell this is the all-new Chrysler, and when you dive inside, you're going to notice even more innovations for 2015. Now again, this is the 200S, which means it's going to have a little bit darker appearance on the outside versus that bright and whimsical feel you get on the standard model. Now the exterior compared to last year to me is a lot more aerodynamic, a lot less straightforward, and really gives you a sense of elegance that Chrysler is leaning to. Now I must say there's a hint of blurred lines because it kind of reminded me of the Hyundai Azera and even their Sonata with similar flowing lines and a little bit of haunches on the side. But either way, this is the new Chrysler brand and their new exterior pizzazz that they really are delivering here on the 200. Now the Chrysler 200 is labeled as a mid-size sedan, and by the numbers it fits in that segment quite well. Overall measuring about 192 inches with a wheelbase of 108. Overall height is going to fall under just 5 feet and just over 6 feet wide, and those numbers really come into play on the interior comfort and fairly decent rear cargo. Now imitation is a form of flattery, and when you look at the profile, you can really draw on a lot of the competition out there. You can also draw on maybe a Volvo sedan and other vehicles, but really this is the new design from Chrysler, and it can hold its own, especially compared to last year. This is definitely an improvement. Now when you look at other features, the standard 200 is going to come with standard 17-inch wheels, 18 inches as an option. Here on the 200S, you come standard with 18 inches, with 19 inches an option as well. Now to set the 200S apart from the basic model, Chrysler really want to put an emphasis on a sinister-like appeal, and they do that by putting black glossy accents here around the window, on the mirror, and that front grille. Another thing you're going to notice for 2015 is kind of a redesigned Chrysler badging, putting more emphasis on that wing design. Now to set this vehicle apart even more, you can go with the 19-inch optional hyper black aluminum wheels. Now besides redesigning the interior and exterior of the Chrysler 200, they've also made sure to include innovation, the first of which is the smart key systems. Now we test this on a lot of vehicles, and it's one of the first things I mentioned because it is the ease of getting inside your vehicle. Now this is pretty much standard operating procedure. When you get to the driver's door, pull on the handle one time, it's going to unlock all the vehicle. Now it also has a button on the handle as well, and that is pretty much for holding and then locking the vehicle on exit. Now the one thing I did notice is if you're the driver with the key in your pocket and you come up to any other door, it's not going to open. Now a lot of vehicles, the proximity entry is just that. You're around the vehicle and it opens. Now one failure is it doesn't do it here, which means you're pretty much going to always have to either be on the driver's side door or use the antiquated button to unlock the vehicle. Now, there's one thing I've noticed about the midsize sedan market: the numbers just don't add up. The vehicle actually feels bigger than it appears on paper, that referring to the interior comfort, but really the rear cargo space. Now, over the last decade, you've seen this rear deck lid really been cut in half, leaving somewhat of a sliver of a trunk like you see here. Now, what that does is eloquently disguise the huge amount of cargo space you have here on a vehicle like this. Now, for comparison's sake, we just drove the slightly bigger Buick LaCrosse that had tons of interior comfort, but really its Achilles heel came to the cargo space. Now that vehicle had about 13 cubic feet of space. Here on the 200S, a lot more at 16 cubic feet of space. Now what that really comes down to is if you're like me and you want to hit the links, taking your golf clubs can be a problem. Now in this vehicle, it really came in easy. Now as you swing around, that proximity entry smart key system comes into play. There's a button right here, you press it and the trunk easily rises. Now the one thing we noticed in comparison to, again, that somewhat full-size LaCrosse is it had really a narrow opening here. Here on the 200S, tons of width, and really that comes down into play when you load your golf clubs, because on this vehicle you can go quite easily into this niche here and then slide them in with ease. Now easily sliding in 2 or 3 more clubs wouldn't really be a problem. Now that compared to the LaCrosse, that when we put the clubs in, we actually had to angle them across and find the little niche here for the club heads. Now, the one thing the midsize sedan market really has to balance is interior comfort and really that rear cargo area, and the 200S handles that just fine. Now, inside up front, you're gonna have about 42 inches of leg room, with the back seat averaging about 37 inches. Now, those are good numbers, and the best feature is they really didn't add too much leg room in the back, because if they did, it would have compromised all that cargo space. And that's one of the biggest features I like here on the 200S, is that it really has just enough comfort on the inside and tons of space there on the back end. Now, backseat comfort is just as important as the front, and really they do quite well here, again with about 37 inches of space for leg room. Now, they enhance that a little bit with the design of the front seat backs with a little bit of an arch here, giving just a little bit more breathing space. Now, if you notice the design of the seat backs, they are that kind of sculpted bucket seats like you see in the front, with kind of a niche for that center passenger. Now, you also got to think about airflow, and they do quite well. Now, it's not a tri-zone system, but there are two vents here front and center, allowing that air to really flow back here. Really helps to either heat or cool down the rear passengers. Now, if you want to add to more cargo space, they do have a nice pass-through system here, a little hole that allows longer items to kind of go in here and leave passenger space to the sides. Now, when that's not in use, you can have the dual cup holders and a little bit of storage. Now, if you really want to enhance cargo, of course, you can lay these back seats down. Now, it's done fairly easy by pulling this handle, and it tumbles forward. Now, I must admit, I've already slid the front seat forward just a little bit, and that really allows this headrest to stay in place. Now, if you have the seat backs just a little bit further back, you may have to remove that, but that's really easy to do. Now, otherwise, you really, with the seat backs down, it really allows that trunk to almost more than double, gives you a ton more cargo options. Now, one of the biggest redesigns you're going to find here on the Chrysler 200S is the interior and the youthful facelift they have given the vehicle, and really the most notable being these kind of race-inspired seating, a lot of bolstering on the side, the dual kind of cloth leather kind of appeal, and of course the big S emblem right there, really enhancing the sport and the youthfulness of this vehicle. Now, with the redesign of the interior, the biggest feature really comes down to the Uconnect system on the dash, and we've used this numerous times, and just its functionality is so easy, and probably the best one we've seen on the market. Now, pretty much everything is touch screen with just a few knobs down here for volume and selecting, but otherwise you just find what you need. Now, the best feature is under the U apps and the Wi-Fi hotspot. Now, when this is equipped and paid for, pretty much allows you to go down the road and have a huge Wi-Fi for pretty much everyone in the vehicle. Now, it allows you to hook up all your devices and really kind of stream all your information as you go down the road. Now, we use this with the Bluetooth system, allowed us to stream our music, and really no cords had to be connected. Now, in between the front seats, you're going to notice kind of a storage console and dual cup holders like you see on a lot of vehicles, but it's actually a kind of a little more than that. There's actually a little button here, release, slide the cup holders out of the way, and it gives you access to kind of a deep console. Now, this is an area where you can store your electronic devices, because the USB connection, auxiliary jack, and the power supply are right here. Even better, there's kind of an access hole right there, allowing the cords to actually flood through, and you can actually store those devices here, allowing you to reach them more easily. Now, when those cup holders are in place, you still have access to a console right here. Opening this up, looking inside, and you still have great storage. Now, you'll notice there's no electronic lever here, but rather a knob like we've seen on other vehicles. Really a nice selector. Now, there is a sport mode. Again, we don't use that quite often. We pretty much go straight drive. Now, as for climate control, this did come with the optional dual zones up front, really dialing in your specific comfort for both passenger and driver. Now, one of the best features on the vehicle really has to come down to the gauge cluster behind the steering wheel. Now, it does have the standard tachometer on the left and the speedometer, but right there front and center is the digital readout display that you can customize. Now, it does have the speedometer, tire pressure, and other information, especially the fuel economy that you can kind of monitor as you're going down the road. Now, this was the 200S. The S, I assume, meant sport. Sport referred to horsepower of the hood, but that shockingly wasn't what I found. It was instead a 2.4 liter inline 4-cylinder engine. Now, that's in stark contrast to that kind of menacing exterior we've already talked about, and really shocking considering the 200 does have also the 3.6 liter V6 engine in its arsenal. Now, when you look at the 4-cylinder, it delivers about 184 horses and 173 foot-pounds of torque. Now, what that translates to when you press the gas gas is a lot of scream under the hood and just a little bit of boot scoot boogie. Now if you look at the 3.6 liter V6, of course that's better horsepower, just under 300 horses. Now both engines are coupled with a 9-speed automatic transmission. Now what we found on the 4-cylinder is it was also coupled with the paddle shifters and a sport-like mode. Now I rarely use that because I prefer the vehicle to really do the dancing, but it just wasn't the case. The vehicle probably needed to be more in the sport mode to really enhance that feeling. Now if you take the 3.6 liter and deliver it on this vehicle, it really, to me, matches the exterior. And that does it for this edition of Road Warrior and our test drive behind the wheel, the all-new 2015 Chrysler 200S. Now again, this is the more sinister sibling in the family, giving that black accent, a little bit more power, but most notably, still sticking with the basics of mid-size, giving you great interior volume and huge cargo space. Now I can't harp on it enough that this vehicle is the golf man's outing, allowing you to get that foursome to the tee box along with the clubs. Now again, I'd like to thank you for watching this edition of Road Warrior, and as always, keep both hands on the wheel and eyes straight ahead.